The lie that changed everything. Nathan Carter had spent his life building an empire out of words, contracts, and ironclad negotiations. As a corporate lawyer, he thrived on precision. The idea of uncertainty, of emotions dictating decisions, was something he had long abandoned. He believed in control, until the day his world shattered. 4 years ago, he had sat in a sterile doctor's office, hearing the cold, clinical words that had rewritten his future. "I'm sorry, Nathan, but you're infertile. You'll never be able to father children." Those words had been delivered without emotion, without sympathy, as if they were just another legal clause to be acknowledged and filed away. He had accepted them because science didn't lie. Facts were facts, and with that one medical declaration, he had made what he thought was the only rational decision. He had walked away from the woman he loved, Emily Hayes. It had been one of the hardest choices of his life, but he had done it to spare her. He refused to be the reason she never had children, never had a family. She deserved better. She deserved a man who could give her everything. So he had left, and he had never looked back. Or at least, that was what he told himself. Now, standing inside the warm confines of a bustling cafe on a crisp autumn morning, everything he had believed for the past 4 years came crashing down in a single devastating moment. There, just a few feet away, was Emily. Time hadn't dulled her beauty. Her golden brown hair still cascaded in soft waves past her shoulders, and her emerald green eyes held the same quiet strength he had fallen in love with. But it wasn't Emily alone who stole his breath. Standing beside her were 2 little girls, no older than 3 or 4. Identical. Their golden hair shone under the morning light, framing faces so delicate, so achingly familiar. But it was their eyes that sent a tremor through Nathan's soul. They were his eyes. Wide, curious, the exact shade of piercing blue he saw in the mirror every morning. A slow, suffocating horror crawled up his spine. No, it's not possible. His mind rebelled, grasping for logic, for reason, for any explanation that didn't lead to the conclusion forming in his gut. He was infertile. He had the medical reports to prove it. There was no way. Asterisk, asterisk, no way. Asterisk, asterisk, these girls could be his. And yet he knew. Deep in his bones, in the very marrow of his existence, he knew. Nathan barely registered the sound of coffee machines hissing, of baristas calling out orders. The entire world blurred into the background as Emily turned, her gaze locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, recognition flickered in her eyes. Her breath caught, her posture stiffened, and a storm of unreadable emotions passed over her face. Shock, hesitation, and something else. Something dangerously close to pain. Nathan's pulse pounded like a war drum. His mouth was dry, his thoughts in chaos. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, but his voice refused to cooperate. It was one of the little girls who shattered the silence. Mommy, the older-looking one, tugged on Emily's sleeve, her voice high and sweet. "Can we have hot chocolate?" The single word mommy was a hammer to Nathan's chest. Emily hesitated, then smiled, a forced, brittle smile, and smoothed the girl's curls. "Of course, sweetheart." Nathan stepped forward before he could stop himself. Emily. Her name left his lips like a prayer, like a curse. Emily stiffened. The protective way she placed a hand on each child's shoulder didn't go unnoticed. She was shielding them. From him. 1,000 emotions warred within him, but only one mattered. Are they mine? The words trembled on his tongue, too raw, too dangerous to be spoken aloud. But then Emily's gaze met his, and he saw it, the truth, the answer he feared most. He didn't have to ask. The truth was in the way she stood, in the way her lips parted but no words came, in the sheer devastation flickering in her emerald eyes. Nathan's world tilted. His stomach churned. The floor beneath him no longer felt real. 4 years. 4 years of believing a lie. 4 years of thinking he could never have children. 4 years of missing out on this. On them. A slow, creeping rage burned through him. Who had done this to him? Who had stolen his future, his family? His hands clenched into fists. Emily took a step back, her eyes wary. "Nathan," she said cautiously, "we shouldn't do this here." His voice was low, controlled, but edged with something raw. "Then tell me where," she exhaled, glancing at the girls, who were watching with innocent curiosity. "Not in front of them." He swallowed hard, nodding. Emily turned to the barista, placing an order for the girls' hot chocolate. Nathan barely registered it. His mind was still struggling to process the impossible. When she faced him again, her expression was unreadable. "There's a park across the street," she said quietly. "Meet me there in 10 minutes. Then she turned and walked away, her daughter's small hands clutched tightly in hers. Nathan stood frozen, his entire body trembling with fury, confusion, and something he wasn't ready to name. He had been lied to. He had lost 4 years. And now he was going to find out why. And whoever had done this to him, whoever had stolen his children from him, was going to pay. Buried lies and unfinished truths. Nathan Carter's hands were still shaking as he stepped out of the cafe, his mind a storm of emotions he couldn't contain. The cold morning air did nothing to cool the fury burning in his chest. He felt betrayed, robbed, blindfolded for 4 years by a lie so devastating that he couldn't begin to process its impact. His daughters, had been growing up without him, and he had never known. Someone had done this to him. Someone had manipulated him, stolen from him the very thing he had always longed for, but convinced himself he could never have. His children. He crossed the street, his heart hammering as he approached the park where Emily had told him to meet her. The playground was nearly empty, save for a few parents pushing toddlers on swings or walking their dogs along the winding paths. Then he saw her. Emily stood near a wooden bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her daughters sat a few feet away on the grass, giggling as they played with a small stuffed bunny. Nathan's throat tightened. His daughters. How many moments had he missed? Their first words, their first steps, their birthdays. He forced himself to stay calm as he approached. Emily's shoulders tensed when she noticed him, but she didn't move. He stopped a few feet away, his voice lower than he intended, but laced with barely restrained emotion. "Start talking." Emily took a deep breath, looking away. "Nathan." "No." He shook his head. "No more hesitation. No more avoiding the truth. You had 4 years to tell me." 4 years, Emily. "So tell me now, who did this?" Emily's green eyes shimmered, her gaze filled with something unreadable. "I tried." Nathan frowned. "What?" "I tried to tell you, Nathan," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I called you. I left messages. I showed up at your office once, but your assistant told me you weren't available. And then," she exhaled shakily, "you disappeared. You changed your number. You moved." Nathan's chest tightened. "I never changed my number." Emily's lips parted slightly. "What?" "I never changed my number," he repeated, his mind racing. "And I never got any messages from you." A flicker of something dark and dangerous passed over Emily's face. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the bench as realization dawned. "Someone made sure we never spoke." Nathan's fists clenched. He had been too deep in his own grief back then, too blinded by the crushing weight of believing he was infertile, to notice that something wasn't right. But now he wasn't going to let it go. He sat down beside her, his tone urgent. "Emily, I need you to think. Who had access to me during that time? Who might have known about your pregnancy? Who had the power to?" He stopped suddenly as a name hit him like a freight train. Vanessa Reed, the doctor who had delivered the devastating news. The woman who had told him, without a flicker of doubt, that he would never be a father. The one person who had given him the scientific proof that had dictated his decision to walk away. His blood turned to ice. Emily noticed the shift in his expression. "Nathan." His jaw clenched. Vanessa. Vanessa Reed. Emily's brows furrowed. Your doctor. She was the one who gave me the diagnosis, he murmured, more to himself than to her. She was the one who told me I was infertile. I never questioned it. I trusted her. His fingers curled into fists. What if she lied? Emily's eyes widened. That's insane. Why would she do something like that? Nathan didn't have an answer. But he would find one. His phone was in his hand before he even realized what he was doing. He pulled up his medical records, his breathing sharp and uneven. 4 years ago, he had taken the test, received the results, and never looked back. Now, he needed the truth. I need another test, he muttered. Emily frowned. Nathan, I need to know for sure. His voice was edged with steel. If I've been lied to, I need proof. Emily hesitated, then nodded. I'll go with you. Nathan looked at her, surprised. Her eyes softened, but there was still an edge of caution in her expression. This isn't just about you, Nathan. It's about them. She glanced toward their daughters, who were still playing, oblivious to the storm unraveling between their parents. If someone stole you from them, I need to know why. Nathan swallowed the lump in his throat. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting alone. 4 hours later, private clinic. Nathan sat in the sterile examination room, the tension in his muscles making it almost impossible to stay still. Emily sat beside him, her fingers tapping against the chair's armrest in nervous rhythm. The doctor finally walked in, holding a manila folder. Nathan stood immediately, his heart in his throat. Dr. Patel, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked between Nathan and Emily before exhaling. I rushed the results as you requested, he said. Mr. Carter, I don't know what led you to believe otherwise, but according to these results, there is absolutely no sign of infertility. The room tilted. Nathan had to grip the edge of the examination table to steady himself. He forced himself to speak, but his voice felt distant. Are you sure? Dr. Patel nodded. Without a doubt. Your sperm count, motility, everything is well within normal range. Nathan felt the air rush out of his lungs. His entire world, his entire life, had been built around a lie. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, her face pale. Oh my God. Nathan's hands curled into fists. Vanessa. She had stolen 4 years of his life, 4 years of his daughter's lives. And now he was going to make her pay. That evening, confrontation. Nathan stood outside the hospital where Vanessa Reed worked, his pulse pounding like a war drum. Emily was beside him, her expression set with determination. He wasn't here as a lawyer. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here for justice, for his family. He pushed open the doors, his vision locked onto the reception desk. The nurse barely had time to speak before he demanded, Dr. Reed. Now. The woman blinked, startled. Do you have an appointment? Nathan's nostrils flared. No, but I guarantee you she'll want to see me. The nurse hesitated but then made a quick call. A moment later, she gestured toward the hall. Room 217. Nathan strode forward, Emily right beside him. When he pushed open the door, Vanessa looked up from behind her desk, completely composed. Nathan, she greeted smoothly, as if she hadn't stolen his life. His jaw clenched. You lied to me. Vanessa's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. I did what was best for you. Nathan took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. No, Vanessa, you stole my family. The depths of betrayal. Nathan Carter had spent years mastering the art of uncovering deception. He had built a career dismantling the lies of corporate titans, exposing corruption, and negotiating billion-dollar settlements with ruthless efficiency. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. Standing in Vanessa Reed's office, his fists clenched, his breath controlled but dangerous, he was no longer the composed corporate lawyer who thrived on strategy and logic. He was a father A father who had been robbed of 4 years with his daughters. And the woman responsible sat before him, perfectly poised, as if she had done nothing wrong. Emily stood beside him, her body tense, her green eyes burning with the same fury he felt in his bones. Nathan took a slow, measured step forward, his voice a lethal whisper. "You lied to me." Vanessa tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I told you what you needed to hear." Nathan's jaw tightened. "What I needed to hear?" His voice was ice. "You told me I was infertile. You took away my family. You stole my children from me. And now you have the audacity to sit there and justify it." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, exhaling as if she had been waiting for this conversation. "You wouldn't have been able to handle it, Nathan." He froze. The sheer arrogance of her words sent white-hot rage flooding through his veins. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Vanessa met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You were on the fast track to becoming one of the most powerful attorneys in the country. I watched you claw your way up, sacrifice everything for your career. A family would have." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Being a distraction." Nathan's hands curled into fists. His nails dug into his palms, but the pain was nothing compared to the fire in his chest. "You thought you had the right to decide that for me," he hissed. Vanessa didn't flinch. "You wouldn't have made it, Nathan. You wouldn't be where you are today if you had known Emily was pregnant." Emily let out a strangled laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "Oh my God, you actually believe this? You actually think you did him a favor?" Vanessa's gaze flickered to Emily, calm but unyielding. "I did." Nathan slammed his hands down on her desk. "You destroyed my life." Vanessa exhaled, as if she was trying to explain something to a child. "I ensured your success. Look at where you are now, Nathan. You are a millionaire attorney, feared in the courtroom. If you had known about Emily's pregnancy, if you had chosen to stay, you would have divided your focus. You wouldn't have achieved what you have today." Nathan's pulse thundered in his ears. His entire life. Asterisk, asterisk, his entire future. Asterisk, asterisk, had been dictated by a lie. A carefully crafted, manipulative, monstrous lie. "You played God," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "You took the choice away from me." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "I gave you the life you were meant to have." Nathan's blood ran cold. The lack of remorse in her voice. Asterisk, asterisk, the sheer audacity of her justification. Asterisk, asterisk, told him everything he needed to know. She had never planned to tell him the truth. If he had never run into Emily that day of the cafe, he would have never known. His daughters would have grown up without him, believing he had abandoned them. Vanessa had taken 4 years from him. 4 years of first words, first steps, first birthdays. 4 years he would never get back. Nathan took a step back, his entire body trembling with restrained fury. "I should sue you," he said coldly. "I should ruin your career, strip away your medical license, and make sure you never work in this field again." Vanessa didn't even blink. "You could," she admitted, "but it won't change anything." Nathan's jaw clenched so hard it ached. "You're right," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "It won't bring back the time I lost." He exhaled sharply, his fists still shaking. "But I swear to God, Vanessa, I will make sure you never do this to anyone else." Vanessa finally looked away, something shifting in her expression. Not regret, never regret, but recognition. Recognition that she had lost. Nathan turned on his heel, his body thrumming with adrenaline as he stormed out of the office. Emily followed, her breath unsteady, her face pale. Neither of them spoke until they reached the elevator. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Emily let out a long, shuddering breath. "That woman is insane." Nathan ran a hand down his face, his anger still simmering just beneath the surface. "She never intended for me to find out. She never planned to tell the truth." Emily crossed her arms, shaking her head. "What do we do now?" Nathan swallowed hard. "We move forward." Emily frowned. And how do we do that? Nathan turned to face her fully, his voice low but unwavering. I fight for them. Emily's lips parted slightly. Nathan. I fight for my daughters, he said, his voice thick with conviction. I've already lost 4 years. I refuse to lose another second. Emily exhaled, her green eyes searching his. It won't be easy. I don't care. His hands clenched. I will do whatever it takes. If I have to spend the rest of my life proving to them that I love them, I will. Emily was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, her shoulders relaxed. Okay, she whispered. We do this together. Nathan's chest tightened. For the first time in 4 years, he felt like he could breathe. But his fight was only just beginning. Fighting for fatherhood. Nathan Carter had never lost a case in his life. But this was the most important battle he would ever fight. As he stood outside Emily's house that evening, staring at the warmly lit windows, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear. He had faced ruthless CEOs, high-stakes negotiations, and courtroom battles that determined the fate of billion-dollar companies. But none of them compared to this. This wasn't business. This was personal. 4 years of stolen time. 4 years of birthdays missed, of bedtime stories never read, of scraped knees he hadn't been there to kiss better. He had spent his whole life chasing success, believing control was the key to happiness. But now, standing in front of the home where his daughters lived, daughters he hadn't known existed, he realized something. None of it mattered without them. Nathan tightened his grip on the bouquet of flowers in one hand and the stuffed animals in the other. He had no idea if they liked flowers. He had no idea if they even liked stuffed animals. Because he didn't know them. And that thought alone nearly crushed him. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door swung open, revealing Emily. She hesitated for a moment, searching his face, before stepping aside. Come in. Nathan swallowed and stepped inside. The house was warm and inviting. Family photos lined the walls. Pictures of Emily, of Sophie and Isabel. But none of him. He had been absent from their story. But not anymore. Nathan's heart pounded as he heard the sound of small footsteps running down the hall. Then they appeared. Sophie and Isabel. His daughters. They skidded to a stop at the sight of him, their bright blue eyes wide with curiosity. Nathan felt his throat tighten. They were so small, so full of life, so innocent. And they didn't know who he was. Emily cleared her throat. Girls, this is Nathan. Sophie tilted her head. Mommy's friend. Nathan crouched down, setting the gifts on the floor. He met their gazes, forcing himself to breathe past the crushing weight in his chest. I'm your dad. The words felt foreign on his tongue, and yet they were the most natural thing he had ever said. Isabel frowned. You don't look like a dad. Nathan swallowed a laugh. What do dads look like? Sophie crossed her arms. Uncle Gray has a big belly. Emily coughed, obviously holding back a laugh. Nathan smiled softly. Well, I don't have a big belly, but I am your dad. The girls exchanged a look, processing his words. Sophie eyed the stuffed animals beside him. Are those for us? Nathan nodded. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got these. Isabel hesitated, then stepped forward, picking up the bunny plushie. She hugged it to her chest before looking up at him. Thank you. Nathan felt something inside him crack. God, he had missed so much. Emily exhaled. Why don't we all sit down? Nathan followed her into the living room, his heart still hammering. He sat on the couch while Sophie and Isabel curled up beside their mother, watching him cautiously. Emily hesitated before speaking. The girls don't fully understand yet. They know they don't have a dad in their life, but they're still too young to really process what that means. Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. I don't want to overwhelm them. I want to be here. Sophie looked up. Where were you? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the way her small voice cut through him like a blade. Emily started to speak, but Nathan raised a hand, stopping her. He needed to answer this himself. "I didn't know about you," he admitted, his voice thick. "I didn't know I had daughters. If I had, I would have never left." Sophie frowned. "But you're here now." Nathan nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, and I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him for a long moment, as if testing the truth in his words. Then, slowly, she picked up one of the flowers he had brought and twirled it in her fingers. Okay. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. The road to redemption. Over the next few weeks, Nathan made good on his promise. Every morning, he stopped by to see the girls before they went to preschool. He picked them up when Emily needed help. He learned their favorite foods, their bedtime routines, their little quirks. At first, they were hesitant. Sophie was the bolder one, always asking questions, testing him. She was fierce, stubborn, so much like Emily. Isabel was quieter, more observant. She didn't say much, but when she did, her words always carried weight. One evening, as Nathan tucked them into bed, Isabel reached for his hand. "Good night, Daddy." Nathan's throat tightened. His voice wavered as he whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." More than just a father. While Nathan built his relationship with his daughters, something else was happening. Something he hadn't expected. His feelings for Emily. They had never faded. Late at night, after the girls were asleep, they sat together in the kitchen, talking. At first, it was about the girls, how to handle tantrums, preschool events, the little things. But then the conversations turned personal. One night, Emily sighed, stirring her tea. "You never even called after you left." Nathan winced. "I thought I was doing the right thing." She shook her head. It wasn't. He swallowed. "I know that now." Silence stretched between them. Then softly, he said, "I never stopped loving you, Emily." Emily's hand stilled on her cup. She didn't look at him right away. When she finally did, her green eyes were filled with uncertainty, with hesitation, but not rejection. "Nathan." He leaned forward. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I also know that I love you, and I love them. And I want us to be a family." Emily searched his face, as if looking for cracks in his resolve. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if I can trust you again." Nathan exhaled. "Then let me prove it to you. A promise of forever." Months passed, and slowly, carefully, Nathan rebuilt what had been broken. Not just with his daughters, but with Emily. One evening, as they all sat together, Nathan, Emily, Sophie, and Isabel, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Sophie climbed onto his lap, giggling as she played with his tie. "Mommy says daddies love their kids." Nathan smiled, his heart full. "They do." Isabel leaned against him, yawning. "Do you love Mommy too?" Emily's breath hitched. Nathan met her gaze. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I love her very much." Silence. Then Sophie grinned. "Then you should marry her." Emily let out a startled laugh, covering her mouth. Nathan smirked. "You think so?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. Nathan turned to Emily, his heart pounding. "Well?" Emily swallowed hard. Then, finally, finally. She nodded. "Yes." Nathan pulled her close, pressing a soft, lingering kiss against her lips as his daughters cheered in the background. And for the first time, Nathan Carter knew what true victory felt like. Because this was the only thing that had ever mattered. A family rebuilt. Nathan Carter had always believed that control was the key to success. He had built an empire by being meticulous, by never letting emotions cloud his judgment. But now, sitting on the couch with his daughters curled up beside him, he realized how wrong he had been. For 4 years, he had let someone else dictate his fate. For 4 years, he had missed out on this. He gently brushed Sophie's hair back as she dozed off against his chest, while Isabel held onto his sleeve, her tiny fingers gripping him as if afraid he might disappear. He wasn't going anywhere. Not ever again. Emily sat across from him, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. Nathan exhaled, meeting her gaze. "We need to talk," he murmured softly, careful not to wake the girls. Emily hesitated before nodding. "Let's put them to bed first." An unfinished conversation. Nathan carried Sophie to her room, tucking her in gently. Her small hand reached for him in her sleep, and he squeezed it lightly before stepping away. In the doorway, Emily stood watching, a strange look in her eyes. "You're good with them," she murmured. Nathan swallowed. "I'm trying." Emily exhaled, leading him back to the living room. Once they sat down, she crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "You want to talk," she said. "So talk." Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I know this won't be easy," he admitted. "I know I can't just walk back into your life and expect everything to go back to the way it was. But Emily, I don't just want to be your father. I want to be with you." Emily tensed. "Nathan." "I still love you," he interrupted gently. "I never stopped." Emily let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You say that now." Nathan shook his head. "I've always loved you. I left because I thought I was doing what was best for you. I thought you deserved a chance at a real family, with someone who could give you children. I was wrong." Emily's gaze softened, but the walls around her heart remained. "Nathan, I don't know if I can trust you again." Nathan's chest tightened. He had expected this, and he was ready for it. "Then let me prove it to you." His voice was steady. "Let me show you that I'm not the same man who walked away. Let me show you that I will never leave again." Emily studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how to let you back in." Nathan reached across the space between them, gently taking her hand. "Then let's start slow," he murmured. "Let's figure this out together." Emily exhaled shakily but didn't pull away. It wasn't an answer, but it was a beginning. The battle for custody. The next morning, Nathan sat in his office, staring at the papers in front of him. His assistant, Daniel, shifted uncomfortably on the other side of the desk. "You sure about this, boss?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "I've never been more sure about anything in my life." In front of him was a stack of legal documents, a custody agreement. He wasn't just going to be a father in name. He was going to fight for his rights. Vanessa had stolen 4 years from him. He wasn't about to let anyone take another second. Emily had been wary when he mentioned legal steps, but he had reassured her. This wasn't about taking the girls away from her. It was about making sure no one, could ever push him out of their lives again. "I want to do this right," he said. "I don't want it to be a fight, but I need it in writing that I have rights to my daughters." Daniel nodded. "Understood. I'll get everything set up." Nathan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. This was happening. And he wasn't backing down. Emily's choice. That evening, Nathan met Emily at a quiet cafe, the weight of the legal documents heavy in his briefcase. Emily sat across from him, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. When she finally looked up, her green eyes were sharp. "Are you suing me for custody?" Nathan shook his head. "No. I don't want to take them away from you. I just want to make sure I have legal rights as their father." Emily exhaled, rubbing her temples. "Nathan, I don't want this to turn into a battle." "It won't," he promised. "But I need to know that if anything happens, if anyone tries to come between me and them again, that I have something legal backing me up." Emily hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll sign it." Nathan blinked. "Just like that." Emily gave him a tired smile. "Nathan, I know you love them, and I know you won't walk away again." Nathan felt his chest tighten. This was trust. Maybe not fully, maybe not completely, But it was a step, and he would earn the rest. A proposal of forever. A month later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Nathan sat in the park with Sophie and Isabel. They giggled as they ran around, chasing butterflies, their laughter the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Emily sat on a bench nearby, watching them, a soft smile on her lips. Nathan walked over, sitting beside her. "Thank you," he murmured. Emily raised a brow. "For what?" "For trusting me." Emily exhaled, looking at the girls. "I still have doubts, Nathan. But I see the way they look at you. They adore you. And that means something." Nathan took a deep breath. Then, before he could stop himself, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's eyes widened. "Nathan, I know it's soon," he said quickly. "And I know we still have a lot to figure out. But I also know that I love you. And I love them. And I want us to be a family." Emily swallowed hard. "Nathan, no rush," he said softly. "Just think about it." Emily stared at the ring, emotions flickering across her face. Then, finally, she smiled. "I'll think about it." Nathan exhaled, relief flooding through him. He had won cases, he had built an empire. But this was the only thing he had ever truly fought for, and for the first time in his life, he knew this was the only battle that mattered. A future worth fighting for. Nathan Carter had spent his entire life chasing the next victory. The next case, the next big deal. The next step toward power, prestige, and success. But as he stood at the edge of the park, watching his daughters play, watching Emily smile at them from the bench, he realized something. This was the only thing he had ever truly wanted. Not the million-dollar contracts, not the boardroom battles. Just this, his family. And he wasn't going to let anything take it away from him again. The weight of the past. The days that followed his proposal were filled with uncertainty. Emily hadn't given him an answer. And as much as Nathan tried to be patient, the weight of it gnawed at him. He had spent weeks proving himself, rebuilding trust with Sophie and Isabel, showing Emily that he wasn't the man who had walked away 4 years ago. But was it enough? One evening, as they sat together on Emily's porch, watching the sunset, Nathan finally broke the silence. "Are you still thinking about it?" he asked quietly. Emily sighed, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. "Nathan, this isn't just about us." "I know," he said softly. "It's about them. And that's why I want to do this. I want to give them a real family." Emily exhaled, shaking her head. "But what if it doesn't work? What if this is all just temporary?" Nathan turned to her, his blue eyes steady. "Then I'll spend every day proving to you that it's not." Emily looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. Nathan Carter wasn't a man who made promises he couldn't keep, and this was the most important promise of his life. The final betrayal. Just as Nathan thought he was finally moving forward, the past came crashing back in an unexpected way. One afternoon, as he left his office, his assistant, Daniel, rushed up to him. "Boss, we've got a problem." Nathan frowned. "What kind of problem?" Daniel hesitated before handing over a manila envelope. This was delivered today. No return address. Nathan took it, a sense of unease crawling up his spine. He opened it, and his entire world tilted. Inside were copies of emails. Emails between Vanessa Reed and his father. Nathan's stomach churned as he read through them, his heart hammering against his ribs. Vanessa hadn't acted alone. His own father, Charles Carter, had been part of it. The price of perfection. Nathan stormed into his father's office that evening, the envelope clenched in his fist. Charles Carter sat behind his massive mahogany desk, sipping a glass of whiskey. His silver hair was neatly combed back, his suit impeccable as always. He looked up as Nathan entered, raising an eyebrow. "Nathan." Nathan slammed the envelope onto the desk. Charles glanced at it, then sighed. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." Nathan's jaw clenched. You knew. Charles took another sip of his drink. Of course I knew. Nathan's fists trembled at his sides. Why? His father exhaled, setting the glass down. Because I knew what having a family would do to you. Nathan's blood ran cold. His father leaned back in his chair. You were on the path to greatness, son. A family would have derailed that. You needed to focus. Vanessa understood that. We both did what was best for you. Nathan's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. You stole my children from me. Charles met his gaze without a flicker of regret. And look at where you are now. A millionaire. A legend in the courtroom. Do you really think you would have achieved all of this if you had known about Emily's pregnancy? Nathan's vision blurred with rage. You're wrong, he whispered. Charles shrugged. You'll thank me someday. Nathan snapped. He grabbed his father by the collar, pulling him forward. You don't get to decide what's best for me, he hissed. You don't get to play God with my life. Charles smirked, unbothered. And yet, here you are. Everything I planned for you, fulfilled. Nathan shoved him back, disgust curling in his gut. He had spent his entire life trying to make his father proud. But now he wanted nothing to do with him. You're not my father, Nathan said coldly. Not anymore. He turned and walked out, leaving behind the man who had shaped his entire existence. And for the first time, Nathan felt free. A love worth fighting for. That night, he drove straight to Emily's house. His hands were still shaking as he knocked on the door. Emily answered, her expression instantly shifting to concern. Nathan, what's wrong? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Can we talk? She hesitated before nodding. Come in. They sat in the living room, and for the first time, Nathan told her everything. About Vanessa. About his father. About the betrayal that had shaped his entire life. Emily listened silently, her green eyes filled with emotion. When he finally finished, he let out a long breath. I should have questioned it. I should have fought for you. For them. But I didn't. And I'll never forgive myself for that. Emily reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You didn't know. Nathan met her gaze. But I know now. He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. I love you, Emily. And I love them. And I don't want to waste another second. Emily's breath hitched. Then, finally, finally. She nodded. Okay, she whispered. Let's do this. Nathan pulled her into his arms, pressing a soft, lingering kiss against her lips. And in that moment he knew. He had finally won the only battle that had ever mattered. A promise kept. 2 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Nathan stood at the altar, watching as Sophie and Isabel skipped down the aisle ahead of Emily, their flower crowns slightly askew. And then he saw her. Emily. The love of his life. She walked toward him, her green eyes filled with something he had waited his entire life to see. Peace. She reached the altar, taking his hands in hers. The pastor smiled. Nathan, do you take Emily to be your wife? Nathan didn't hesitate. I do. Emily's eyes shone. Sophie and Isabel have something to say, the pastor added with a smile. Nathan turned, surprised. Sophie and Isabel grinned up at him, each holding a small handmade sign. Sophie's read, Mommy said yes. Isabel's read, now we're a family forever. Nathan's throat tightened, emotion crashing over him like a tidal wave. He knelt down, pulling them both into a hug. I love you, he whispered. They giggled, hugging him back. Emily smiled through her tears, and as Nathan took her hand once more, he knew. This was his real victory, his real home. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Carter had everything he had ever wanted. The legacy of love. Nathan Carter had spent his life believing that power, prestige, and control were the only things that mattered. Now, standing in the backyard of his home, watching his daughters chase fireflies, Under the golden glow of sunset, he knew how wrong he had been. This, this moment of pure, unfiltered joy, was worth more than every case he had won, every deal he had closed, every dollar he had earned. Sophie squealed as she cupped her hands around a tiny, glowing firefly, turning to Isabel. "Look, it's magic." Isabel giggled, watching in awe as the small light flickered against Sophie's fingers before flying away. Nathan leaned against the porch railing, his arms crossed, a rare, genuine smile playing on his lips. Emily stepped beside him, wrapping her arms around herself as she watched their daughters. "They love you, you know," she murmured. Nathan swallowed past the lump in his throat. "I don't deserve it," he admitted. "I missed so much." Emily turned to him, her green eyes filled with something he hadn't seen in a long time, understanding. "You're here now," she said simply. "That's what matters." Nathan looked at her, his heart tightening. 4 years of pain, of betrayal, of stolen time. It all led to this. And for the first time, he wasn't looking back. He was looking forward. A father's redemption. Nathan had spent the last few months proving himself, not just to Emily, but to Sophie and Isabel. He showed up for them, every single day. He took them to school, helped them with their homework, taught them how to ride their bikes. He learned what made them laugh, what made them scared, what made them feel safe. But no matter how much time passed, there was still a tiny sliver of doubt in his heart. One evening, as he tucked them into bed, Sophie suddenly grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "Daddy," she whispered. Nathan's breath caught. It still hit him like a punch to the gut every time they called him that. He swallowed. "Yeah, sweetheart." Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "Are you gonna leave again?" Nathan felt his chest constrict. God. He cupped her small face gently. "No, baby. Never." Sophie studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." She snuggled into her blanket, closing her eyes. Nathan sat there for a long time, just watching them sleep, his hands trembling as he realized how close he had come to losing all of this. To losing them. He kissed their foreheads softly, whispering, "I love you," before slipping out of the room. When he reached the hallway, Emily was there, watching him. He exhaled shakily. She asked if I was going to leave again. Emily's eyes softened. She's still scared. Nathan ran a hand down his face. "How do I fix that?" Emily hesitated, then stepped forward, taking his hand in hers. "You just keep showing up," she murmured. And he would. For the rest of his life. Facing the ghosts of the past, even though Nathan had won his battle for his family, there was one more thing he had to do. He needed closure, and closure meant confronting the past. The next morning, he found himself standing in front of his father's estate. The house was as grand and imposing as it had always been, a symbol of the power and legacy that Charles Carter had built. Nathan's stomach churned as he walked through the doors, the weight of his childhood pressing down on him. His father was waiting for him in his study, seated behind his massive desk, as if nothing had changed. Nathan closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable. Charles raised a brow. "You came back." Nathan exhaled sharply. "I came to tell you something." His father sipped his drink. "Let me guess. You're here to cut ties. To tell me that you've chosen them over this." Nathan's jaw clenched. "I shouldn't have had to choose." Charles leaned back, exhaling. "You think love is more important than power, than legacy." Nathan met his gaze, steady. "I think love is the only thing that matters." His father smirked. "Then you're a fool." Nathan exhaled, shaking his head. "No, Dad. You are." Charles's smirk faded slightly. Nathan took a step closer. "You had a son who would have done anything to make you proud, and instead of supporting him, you tore him down. You manipulated him. You stole his future." His father's expression darkened. "And yet, here you are. Wealthy. Powerful. Exactly where I wanted you to be. Nathan's hands curled into fists. You wanted me to be alone. Silence stretched between them. Nathan exhaled. I used to think I needed your approval, that I had to prove myself to you. His voice hardened. I don't. Charles Carter watched him carefully, his face unreadable. Nathan stepped back. I have a family, a real one, and I refuse to let you have any part of it. His father smirked again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Then why are you here? Nathan's lips curled into a cold smile. To say goodbye. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving the past behind for good. A love that lasts. 1 month later, Nathan stood at the altar, his hands shaking slightly. Sophie and Isabel skipped down the aisle, giggling as they threw flower petals into the air. And then there she was, Emily. His heart stopped. She walked toward him, her green eyes shining with love, her smile soft and full of warmth. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Nathan, the pastor began. Do you take Emily to be your wife, to love and cherish her, for better or worse, for all the days of your life? Nathan didn't hesitate. I do. Emily smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Sophie and Isabel have something to say, the pastor added. Nathan turned in surprise. The girls each held up a sign, their tiny hands gripping the edges excitedly. Sophie's read. Mommy said yes. Isabel's read. Now we're a family forever. Nathan's breath caught. His throat tightened as he crouched down, pulling them both into a tight hug. I love you, he whispered, his voice thick. They giggled, squeezing him back. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, her smile radiant. And as Nathan stood, taking her hand once more, he knew this was his greatest victory. Not the courtroom, not the money, not the power. This family, this love, this forever. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Carter wasn't looking for the next win, because he had already won everything that mattered.